What if the face staring back at you from across the field wasn't a ghost? What if it was someone still alive, someone you loved, standing in a place they couldn't possibly be? That is a wraith. And the terror of it isn't that it appears after death. It's that it appears before. Most supernatural legends haunt the edges of imagination, creatures too vague, too distant to feel real. The wraith is different. It wears a familiar face, it stands in familiar places, and it does nothing. It simply appears. A wraith, in its oldest definition, is a spectral double, the shadowy likeness of a living person, seen by someone who knows them well, in the moments before that person dies. Not after. Before. That distinction matters more than most people realize. A ghost is a remnant, a memory, something that lingers after the damage is done. A wraith is a warning, a signal sent by forces we have never understood, delivered in the cruelest possible way, wearing the face of someone you love. The word itself first appeared in Scottish records in the 16th century, though the belief reaches back much further. Some folklorists trace its roots to Celtic spiritual traditions that predate written history, to a time when the living and the dead were thought to share the same thin world, separated only by the failing light of dusk. Imagine the Scottish Highlands in the late 1700s, before electricity, before gas lamps, before any of the artificial light we use today to push back the dark. At dusk, the fog settles across the hills like something living. The world shrinks to whatever you can see in the fading gray light. You are walking home, a familiar road, a familiar landscape, and then you see them, your brother, your wife, your closest friend, standing completely still at the edge of the path. You call out. No response. You move closer. They vanish. For hours you carry the unease of it. You tell yourself it was the light, the fog, exhaustion. Then the news arrives. The person you saw is dead. They died miles away at the exact moment you saw them standing before you. This is not one story, this is hundreds of stories, told across centuries, told in the same way, with the same terrible ending. For decades, the people of the Scottish Highlands didn't debate whether wraiths were real. They simply prepared for what it meant to see one. Because they knew. When the wraith appears, death has already made its decision. You are simply the last to find out. Scotland did not invent this terror alone. Across the water in Ireland, they called it the fetch, a perfect double of the living person, seen walking through the house or standing in the garden hours before that person died. The Irish believed that if you saw your own fetch in the morning light, you might survive. But if you saw it at dusk, as the dark was rising, there was nothing left to be done. In Germany, the same figure appeared under a different name, the doppelgänger. Literally, the double walker. A shadow self that existed alongside every living person, unseen until the moment death drew close. Unlike the Scottish wraith, some German traditions believed the doppelganger could be encountered by the person it mirrored, and that meeting your own double was the final omen. Norse traditions spoke of the Vardoger, a spirit that preceded a person's arrival, heard before it was seen, walking through a door before the living person opened it, calling out in a voice that carried down an empty corridor. The Vardoger didn't signal death exactly. It signaled something stranger, that the soul moved ahead of the body. That part of you was already somewhere else doing what you hadn't done yet. Different names, different landscapes, different centuries, same shape standing in the half-light. Which raises a terrifying question. Why would cultures with no contact, no shared language, no way of comparing stories, all arrive at the same nightmare? Some say it was coincidence, the universal human fear of death finding the same symbol independently. Others believe it's something stranger, that the wraith isn't a legend at all, that it's a phenomenon, documented, consistent, deeply real, that these cultures were simply honest enough to name. The records left behind by these encounters are not vague. In 1691, Scottish minister Robert Kirk documented what he called co-walkers, spirit doubles observed in the Highland communities he served. Kirk was not a superstitious man. He was a scholar, a minister, a careful observer. He did not claim to have seen these figures himself. He recorded the testimony of people who had. The pattern was always the same: a figure seen in a familiar place, a face known to the witness. No response when called, gone before anyone could reach it. Hours or days later, the person whose face it wore was dead. One account from Aberdeenshire in the early 1800s describes a woman watching her husband cross the field near their home. She raised her hand. He didn't respond. She thought nothing of it. Perhaps he hadn't seen her. Perhaps he was deep in thought. Later that same day, she received word that her husband had died miles away in an accident, at the exact time she saw him standing in that field. Could it have been grief made visible? A mind so tuned to love that it conjured what it feared losing? Possibly. But the accounts don't read like grief. They read like confusion. Like a woman who waved at her husband on an ordinary afternoon and didn't understand, until hours later, what she had actually seen. To this day, accounts like this surface with a consistency that skeptics have never fully explained. A daughter seeing her father sitting in his usual chair the morning of his death, 300 miles away. A husband watching his wife walk through the kitchen door 3 hours after she died in a hospital bed. Not a ghost seen in grief. A wraith seen before the news arrived, before anyone knew there was news to deliver. There is something important to understand about the wraith that modern horror has almost entirely erased. It does not want to harm you. In every traditional account across Scotland, Ireland, Germany, and the Norse world, the wraith does not speak. It does not reach for you. It does not scream. It simply appears, and then it disappears. Modern films and video games have transformed the wraith into a predator, a violent, aggressive entity that attacks the living. That version makes for compelling fiction, but it bears almost no resemblance to the original legend. The wraith, in its oldest form, is a messenger, a signal that something has already been decided in whatever place decisions like that are made. It appears not to terrorize, but to warn, to give someone a final moment with the face of the person they are about to lose, which almost makes it more terrible, not less. Because the warning changes nothing. You see the face. You feel the unease. You cannot name the fear rising in your chest. And then the news comes. And you understand, too late, what it was trying to tell you. There are those who offer a rational explanation for the wraith. The human mind, they argue, is pattern-seeking by nature. When someone we love dies, we instinctively review everything that came before. The strange dream 3 nights ago. The feeling of dread on an ordinary afternoon. The figure glimpsed at the edge of vision. In retrospect, those moments become meaningful. They become omens. The mind rebuilds the timeline to include a warning it can understand. This is not dishonesty. It is how grief works. It is how memory works. But it does not fully explain the accounts that came before the death was known. The woman in Aberdeenshire waved at her husband before any messenger had arrived. She wasn't grieving. She wasn't searching for signs. She was simply walking home. And yet, reports of death apparitions continue to surface today. Online communities dedicated to paranormal research document new accounts every month. The details change. Modern settings, modern language, modern lives. But the shape of the story remains unchanged. Someone sees a face they recognize. The face doesn't respond. The face disappears. And then the phone rings. For decades, researchers have attempted to catalog these reports, to find the flaw, the coincidence, the misremembering. Yet every year, new accounts arrive that carry the same unmistakable weight as the ones recorded 3 centuries before them. The technology changed. The wraith didn't. Whether the wraith is folklore, psychology, coincidence, or something that refuses to be explained, it remains one of the oldest death omens in human history. A shadow that arrives before the end, a face where it shouldn't be, a glimpse of someone who is still alive. For now. Because if a ghost appears after death, there is nothing left to do. But if a wraith appears before it, the question becomes much harder to ignore. Was it a warning? Or was it simply letting you know that fate had already made its decision?